A while ago I asked for people to send in what art advice they might be able to share, and collectively I got a good deal of useful ones that I'm going to go over and possibly add on to in this video. I heard a lot of things that I just didn't consider at all before doing this, and hopefully you'll be able to take away something new in that same way from watching. These aren't sorted in any particular order, they're just kind of by when I added them, and anyways I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the first tip. First, these people mentioned the effectiveness of referencing from outside sources for your artwork. I got a few submissions like this, so I'm going to combine them into this point. References can give you inspiration if you're stumped on what to draw. It can help you learn how to approach something that you may have not been able to figure out on your own, and can be more beneficial than tracing in a lot of ways. Not that tracing is necessarily a bad way to learn, as long as you're not posting it, of course, but referencing is that line in the middle where you can draw something you weren't able to before, but still have to learn how to draw it in the process. I would always recommend using real images rather than drawing off of other art. Not that you can never do this and that it will never be helpful, but because you can figure out for yourself how you want to adapt that into your style and what traits you might want to exaggerate or omit, if that makes sense. I like how it was phrased in this sentence about focusing on general patterns rather than just trying to replicate the image. This comment suggested trying to do artwork in the opposite version of your current style to experiment and discover new ways to draw that you might like even more. They described this as drawing the opposite of everything you already draw. She used the example that if you typically draw small-nosed characters with round shapes, to try characters with big noses and angular shapes. Even if you don't end up liking or keeping the style, it's a fun activity nonetheless and kind of forces you to try something completely outside your comfort zone. Additionally, she suggested using a pose or expression sheet to try and get outside your comfort zone. Whenever I see these around social media, I always save them because they're actually a ton of fun, especially because I have a bad habit of reusing expressions very frequently. You could even try to make a sheet of your own if you're feeling ambitious. This artist mentioned that they lift their palm from the screen or paper while they draw. I tried this, and while it does feel different, I can see how it could be beneficial to try and make a habit out of this. They also mentioned that you should draw shapes that you see in what you're drawing. This is similar to how I sketch, and I agree that it's a lot easier to develop poses this way. Here it was suggested to draw on different mediums to develop your style or find something you enjoy. I fully advocate for this. Whenever I find something lying around somewhere that I haven't tried before, like clay or paint or dry erase, I always give it a try, and even if it turns out very bad because I'm not used to it and don't know anything about it, it's fun to give it a go regardless. Here someone suggested some tips for coloring and picking colors. She brought up a good point that you should shift colors on all three axes, hue, saturation, and value, when picking different ones. This is something that I use constantly, especially when I'm picking colors to shade with or when I'm designing new characters. What I do is I try to pick towards blue, meaning I move the color one or two colors that get it closer to blue on the color wheel, or this line here, and then I drag the color down just a little bit, as well as not straight down but more towards the color. You don't have to drag it down that much because it's already darker as it's moving towards blue, which is typically darker than the color. For example, if I pick a darker color for red, I usually go to pink because that's the fastest way from red to blue. You don't have to pick towards blue. If you change the color you're picking towards, you can change the entire feel of the drawing. She went way more in depth here, but I didn't want to steal everything she wrote because she mentioned it was for a designing related video of her own. Here's a tip for developing character design skills. Draw artwork of designs artists you view as more skilled or aspire to reach the experience level of have made. Just by drawing their designs, you might pick up design habits from them that will improve your own skill. This is how I picked up some habits in my design process, so I think it's a really good way of improving in that regard. Here's a tip on how to learn how to draw art of aspects you struggle with or feel are your weaknesses, like different species or body types or anything really. Find a character you really like that has these traits so you're more motivated to draw them multiple times. For example, I hate drawing hats, but I'm in love with my character Trolley, and drawing him has helped me with that. Here it's mentioned that it's fine to do studies or practice something and not post it. I have multiple filled sketchbooks of random things that I felt like drawing and never shared and don't really intend to. It's how you learn and get better. Here it's encouraged to learn from styles of others, but discouraged to mimic them too heavily. I would honestly agree with this, because while there's nothing wrong with mimicking another style, I think you can learn more from trying to learn from a wider sample of people and trying to incorporate your own ideas as well. I also think it's more helpful in the long run because you won't have to keep referring to that person every time you try something new. I believe what is being said in this tip is that using pre-made brushes is perfectly okay and helpful. I personally had so much fun with these types of brushes, so I completely agree. Though I'd encourage you to make your own pre-made brushes for personal use since it'll probably fit your style better. Here it said that along with improving your skill, improving your art efficiency is valuable to learn as well. I agree heavily because I think I started to notice the most rapid improvement when I started focusing on that efficiency aspect along with just general skill improvement. Once I started bringing around a sketchbook and doodling in my free time, I've gotten so much better at poses, expressions, and just bettering my muscle memory for how to start certain drawings. This doesn't mean you should always draw as fast as possible and sacrifice quality for speed, but just having these two skills coexist can only help you. This tip says to improve your skills on paper before trying them digitally. In my opinion, art on paper and art made digitally feel so different and focus more heavily on completely different skills, which is why doing both can really help you. If you're noticing that you're significantly worse at one of these mediums, try giving that one some focus because it can develop a skill that the other might not do as well. Essentially, this tip encourages you to expand your comfort zone by trying new things. Instead of just accepting that you're not good at something, try to focus on that and improve it. There's really no better way to improve. It's natural to not want to do this at first, but it'll really only help you in the long run because you'll know more than you did before and you'll be able to create your ideas more easily. This tip says that drawings look more complex or higher quality when drawn on a larger canvas using thinner line art because they'll just have more space for details. I usually sell art I drew on a smaller canvas for less money because it took less time and it's less detailed. This tip says to flip your canvas once in a while and use the tools provided to you by your art program to their full extent. I could not agree more. If I hear one more person tell me that Procreate doesn't have an adjustable fill tool, I will lose my mind. Getting to know your art program can really improve your art and the time that it takes to make it. Here it said that you should incorporate your character into the background as much as possible. This means having objects in front of and behind them, like trees or plants or grass or whatever, and making them look like they fully fit into the background. Here, this artist says that doing multiple sketches and experimenting can benefit you, and when you're doing line art, you should try and build off of your sketch rather than just trace it. I cannot agree with this more because I think the reason we sometimes feel like our line art looks worse than our sketch is because we just trace our sketch and don't build off of it. My friend Guppyfishy has an in-depth video about this topic, and I encourage you to check that out with the link in the description. This artist says that in general, when shading and lighting, you should know your light source. This is basically what I'd tell anyone who asks me how to shade. Your shading and your lighting should be based off of where you want the light to be coming from in a certain drawing. So rather than having the shading come from all directions, think about where the light is. Here, this tip says that triangles are useful for perspectives and for poses. I've actually never heard this one before, to be honest, but it's really cool. They also mentioned that you can use scribbles for your sketches if they aren't looking how you want them to. This artist says that when you reference a picture, you can trace the photo first and then reference off of what you traced rather than the photo to get rid of excess details or background elements. I don't typically do this, mostly because I'm too lazy, but I think this is a good method for really complicated reference images. So that's every tip that I covered for this video. If you did submit a tip but it didn't get used, then it's either because I forgot to add it or I wasn't exactly sure how to interpret it and didn't want to represent it, you know, incorrectly, if that makes sense. Some artists included helpful reference images, but I didn't add them just because I didn't know the original artist or if they were comfortable with it being included. My bud Aster added so many helpful tips, so I featured some art she made of Gate, my Sumeyer's Blessing character. Please check out her work because she's really cool and one of my primary art inspirations. She made up a bulk of this video with the tips that she submitted alone. So thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.